All right, hi, good morning. Welcome to GVD News TV, and I am Natoya reporting at the fourth sitting of Parliament, where we welcome Honorable Alan Chastanet back to the House, the political leader and also the leader of the opposition, where he will be sworn in today. And as you can hear, the crowd is jeering from both political sides, and we are about to see the man himself grace us with his presence at the House of What you want to do? You want to go? Let's go. Go in the heat of it? You want to go in the heat of it? Is he walking down? Pardon? Is he walking down?
Here today to support our party, the United People's Party. It is our goal in the next 5 years to work on behalf of the people of St. Lucia as we define ourselves in opposition and as we prepare to ensure the United People's Party is the next government of St. Lucia whenever the next election is.
What is it that you want to do? Well, yeah. That's the reason why we are here to
One ask them we're doing it.
They cannot stop us.
We're good. We're good.
37,000.
to show our support to the United People's Party. We have to show and to prove that in the next 5 years, the United People's Party is going to provide the opposition here in this country, and we are going to ensure
shot? No, that's not him. Yeah, but I don't want to go over there and then
Why us? Then he was in the house talking of him, speaking of him, and he can't represent anybody. Today he's there. Why is this commotion? Today he's there. Why is there commotion? Over what? Because they want to ask him what? They never ask their question. They had a whatever he is. Now the media. And also you want to come here. Nobody all before, nobody answered the question. Other 100 days of his administration. Where was the media? No one spoke. But only now everybody now everybody have your best. All of them. I'm asking you. All people. For your life is best. A man that appeared
promised one thing and have now delivered something entirely different. And the evidence of the last 100 days of mourning and of misery is there for everybody to see. And the opposition will do everything we can to hold this government accountable. And if we cannot hold them accountable in this parliament, we will hold them accountable in that parliament. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chastanet, what is your views on the outpouring of love and support by your supporters?
Fantastic. And I always knew that the supporters were there. While it's 15-2 up here, it was not 15-2 in the polls.
How do you feel right now? How do you feel right now?
I feel very great. I'm very anxious to get to the business of the people.
Here you go, Kian. That's for you. Not you. All the best.
Huh? Really? Okay, so So as you can see and as you can hear, the supporters of the United Workers' Party are up in arms and happy that the political leader has graced the presence, and just in a few minutes he will be sworn in as the leader of the opposition. Yeah, we can do that. Miss Belrose, Miss Belrose, Miss Belrose.
TV.
Good morning to you.
Morning, how are you doing?
We're doing good. And how
Yes.
do you feel about the
I'm ecstatic. I'm ecstatic. I think the advent of our Prime Minister, arrival of the Prime Minister was as anticipated.
Okay.
37,400 people voted for the United Workers' Party. He had gone away, he had taken a break for some time, and now of course you can see he's re-energized and ready to go to come back and do the work that is required with his team to get the United Workers' Party back in office.
Okay, so what can we expect from the opposition now that he has returned?
Now that he's returned, of course, we've been doing quite a bit of work on reorganizing our party. And of course, he's here. You'll be hearing a lot more from us on a regular basis. And of course, the party is strong. And UWP has never been so strong after an election.
Okay, so
we are there and we are ready to go.
So we can confidently say that Honorable Alan Chastanet is here to fight the fight for the people.
Alan Chastanet is back to lead and to do what is required to take this country back for the people of this country.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, so good. Because all right, we're happy.
Let's go.
And you know, it's only when they care people. You understand? Okay.
So as we continue to see the outpouring of support by the United Workers' Party supporters, we have also seen the Labour Party supporters are jeering and making remarks that are not too of nice taste, and also the Prime Minister has also graced the Parliament with his presence, and we're continuing to see the support and the rivalry outside of the House of Parliament. It is indeed going to be an interesting day. So far it has been an interesting morning for both parties in St. Lucia. Okay, now if you're just joining us on GBD TV, we are outside the House of Parliament for the 4th seating of Parliament, where the Honorable Alan Chastanet, leader of the opposition and leader of the United Workers' Party, has graced the Parliament with his presence, and he will be sworn in today. And a large number of supporters of the United Workers' Party has graced the streets with their presence and making their voices be heard, that they are not disappointed in the United Workers' Party or the last administration and the work that they did in St. Lucia. the United Workers' Party supporters are up in arms and happy and jeering and giving all the support and love to ensure that he remembers that he has an army behind him ready and willing to work when he is ready to give them the action call. And the Labour Party supporters are out as well, beating pans and making comments that have not been deterring the United Workers' Party supporters one bit. In just a few minutes, the Honourable Alan Chastanet will be sworn in as the leader of the opposition of St. Lucia, where he has said to us in an interview earlier on that he's ready and willing to fight the fight, and he's going to hold this administration accountable in the House and outside of the House as well.
Today's scripture comes to us from John chapter 15 verse 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you may go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all wisdom, all counsel, and all understanding, we thine unworthy servants, here gathered together, in thy name do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, wisdom to direct and to guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion, and the justice and the safety and honor and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the united and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, through Christian love, charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and forevermore. Amen.
Okay, and if you're just joining us, we are live outside the House of Parliament of St. Lucia, where the Honourable Alan Chastanet, leader of the opposition and leader of the United Workers' Party, has graced us with his presence at the 4th sitting of Parliament, where he will be sworn in shortly as the leader of the opposition. And by no means least that the United Workers' Party supporters has come out in large numbers to ensure that they show him the love and support, and to tell him that they are ready and willing to work when he's ready to give the call of action. And of course, the St. Lucia Labour Party supporters are out as well, beating pan and jeering at the United Workers' Party supporters. The intensification of police presence has been seen as they try to keep the calm between the two political parties. Okay, as of right now, the Honourable Alan Chastanet, leader of the opposition, leader of the United Workers' Party, is being sworn in right this minute, and he is ready and willing to fight the fight for St. Lucia, as he made it clear, and he is going to hold this administration accountable in the House of Parliament and outside the streets as well with the people.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Honourable members, I have received explanations for the absence from the honourable members for Vieux-Fort South, Soufrière Fort Saint-Jacques, and Dennery South. And as a consequence of the absence of the member for Soufrière Fort Saint-Jacques, those papers and SIs standing in her name will be dealt with by the Minister for Youth and Sport. I would also like to inform members of two conferences which will be hosted by the Parliament of St. Lucia. The first will be our post-election conference, which is scheduled to take place from November 30th to December 2nd. I'm positive that all parliamentarians have received that date and will ensure full participation. The second is a Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians virtual conference, which is scheduled for the 7th and the 8th of December 2021. The theme for this conference is, quote, Strong Women, Strong Region, Economic Empowerment of Women, unquote. The member for Soufrière is the point person for this conference, and 2 meetings have already been held at the Parliament to engage all female parliamentarians in preparation for the conference. I want to express my appreciation for members of both sides who have attended those meetings thus far. And I do hope that all of the female parliamentarians will take part in the conference. In conjunction with the presiding officer of the Senate, it has become clear to us that our Parliament has been somewhat deficient in not appointing a committee to deal with the Parliamentary Commissioner. A literal reading of our Constitution would indicate that the Parliamentary Commissioner is in fact a creature of the Parliament, hence the name, and the reports ought to be scrutinized by the committee. And rather than have 2 committees, the President of the Senate and myself have agreed, and in keeping with the terms of the standing orders of both houses, to a joint select committee rather than 2 separate committees. And we will be liaising with the leader of government business, the leader of opposition business of both houses to finalize the composition of that select committee. This Honourable House has also been made aware that the member for Castries South celebrated a birthday last week, and on behalf of the Parliament of St. Lucia, I wish you happy belated birthday greetings. Members, today is an historic day for more than one reason. With the attendance of the Micoud South MP, this House is now constituted with 4 individuals who have held the highest political office in the land, that of Prime Minister. A second historic aspect is that I must now pronounce on one of these 4 individuals. It is not a choice which is mine to avoid. For when I was elected Speaker by the members of this august body, I swore to be fair and impartial, and to ensure our rules and procedures were observed by all, regardless of their station. When I sit here as Speaker, my fidelity is not to anyone or any party, but instead to the House standing orders and the Constitution of St. Lucia. My decisions will never have any umbilical cord tied with being popular or catering to the majority, minority, or even to public opinion. What I do today is my sacred and sworn duty from which I dare not shirk. Shirking is in fact not an option. General elections were held in St. Lucia on Monday, the 26th of July, 2021. Section 54 of the Constitution states, and I quote, "Each session of Parliament shall be held at such place within St. Lucia, and shall be in at such time, not being later than 12 months from the end of the preceding session, if Parliament has been prorogued, or 1 month from the holding of a general election of members of the House, if Parliament has been dissolved, as the Governor General shall appoint by proclamation," unquote. Parliament met for the first time following the election on the 14th of August 2021. The MP from Micoud South was not present. Parliament met a further 2 times, and the MP from Micoud South was also not present. On each occasion, he submitted an electronic note to the clerk regarding his unavailability. Standing Order 80 subsection 2 of the House Standing Orders states, quote, "If without the written leave of the Speaker, any member is in any one session absent from the House for more than 6 consecutive meetings, that member shall, subject to paragraph 3 of this order, vacate his seat in the House under section 34 of the St. Lucia Constitution Order 1978. Paragraph 3 of that same standing order states, and I quote, "Where member A fails to obtain due leave of absence, and B, within 15 days after the session on which the member was absent, as aforesaid, satisfies the Speaker in writing that such failure was unavoidable, paragraph 2 of this order shall not apply to that member." Section 34 of the Constitution headed Tenure of Office states, and I quote, subsection 1, "A member of the House, hereinafter in this section referred to as a member, shall vacate his seat in the House at the next dissolution of Parliament after his election." Subsection 2, "A member shall also vacate his seat in the House if he is absent from the sitting of the House for such period and in such circumstances as may be prescribed in the rules of procedure of the House." I have already stated what the standing orders mandate. It is clear that 6 sittings of the House have not taken place. It is also clear that the member from Micoud South has by electronic note on each occasion of his absence advised the clerk of his absence. It would therefore be left only for the Speaker on the 7th absent to decide whether the explanation given is in the language of the standing order, quote, "satisfactory," unquote, to the Speaker before any expulsion process can be undertaken. The fact is, we never got to the 7th sitting stage, and therefore the point of expulsion becomes moot. What remains very alive is whether the reason given by the member from Micoud South meet, quote, "the satisfactory test." This is necessary as it directly affects whether he should be remunerated as an MP. Standing Order 80 subsection 1 states, "Any member who is prevented from attending a meeting of the House shall acquaint the Speaker as early as possible of his inability to attend." It is my humble view that someone becomes a member of Parliament not by virtue of the oath taken at the sitting, but instead, in the case of the House of Assembly, upon election to the seat as certified by the returning officer. I will, however, readily concede that the oath is necessary to allow participation, among other things, in debates. In this regard, I reference Standing Order 1 of the House of Assembly, which states, quote, except for the purpose of electing a speaker, no member of the House shall sit or vote therein until he has taken and subscribed to the oath of allegiance, unquote. Inherent in the reading of that standing order is that the person is a member at the time of electing a speaker, but is prevented from doing any more unless and until the oath is taken. Consequently, it is only after taking the oath of office that a member becomes entitled to the full rights and benefits of a member of Parliament. In the case Chandras Sharma and others, and the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, the issue before the Privy Council was, and I quote, whether the claimants who had not been sworn are entitled to remuneration as members of the House of Representatives, in our case the House, for a period beginning 11 December 2001 and ending on 6 October 2002. The Privy Council Law Lord stated at paragraph 2, and I quote, in a general election held on the 10th of December 2001, the 18 appellants, all members of the United National Congress, the UNC, were elected to the House of Representatives, the House. In the ordinary course, the House would, at its first meeting after the election, and before proceeding to the dispatch of any other business, have elected a Speaker and Deputy Speaker pursuant to Section 50 of the 1976 Constitution. The appellants would then, in accordance with Section 57 of the Constitution, have taken the oath of allegiance prescribed in the first schedule of the Constitution. They would thereupon have become entitled to participate fully in the business of the House and to payment of a parliamentary salary at the approved rate with effect from 11 December 2001, the day after the poll, unquote. Section 54 of the St. Lucia Constitution is similar in all regards to Section 50 of Trinidad and Tobago's Constitution. I return to the Privy Council case, where the law lords continued at paragraph 3, and I quote, the Trinidad and Tobago general election yielded an exact equality of seats in the House to the People's National Movement and the UNC, each party winning 18 seats. Neither party therefore had a majority in the House. The President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, acting under Section 76(1)(b) of the Constitution, appointed Mr. Patrick Manning, the leader of the PNM, as Prime Minister on the 24th of December 2001. Mr. Manning acted promptly in appointing ministers. On the 26th December 2001, with effect from that same date, he appointed the remaining 17 members of his party, all as ministers. The law lords continue at paragraph 4. Pursuant to a presidential proclamation made pursuant to Section 67(1) of the Constitution, the new Parliament met for the first time after the general election on 5th April 2002. On that day and the following day, the House attempted but failed to elect a Speaker. Because of the equality of votes on each side of the House, there was no majority in favor of any member put forward by either party and no majority in favor of any outside candidate. There was thus an impasse. On the 6th of April 2002, Parliament was prorogued. On the 28th of August 2002, Parliament met again and the House again tried to elect a Speaker, but it remained deadlocked and was unable to make an election. On 30th August 2002, the President dissolved Parliament and a general election was held on the 7th of October 2002. In this election, the PNM won a clear majority of seats and the previous deadlock was not repeated. but the appellants were aggrieved because no speaker had been elected in the previous parliament. They had been unable to take the oath of allegiance, although it has never been suggested they were not entirely ready to do so. And because they had not taken the oath of allegiance, the House authorities held they were not entitled to draw a salary. The appellants were the more aggrieved because their PNM opponents, all in receipt of ministerial salaries, suffered no comparable detriment. Unquote. The 23rd 2004 edition of Erskine May's Treatise on the Law, Privileges, Proceedings and Usage of Parliament describes the United Kingdom practice very clearly on pages 27 and 28. And I quote, "The salary of a member becomes payable when he takes the oath or makes the affirmation required by law and begins from the day following that on which the poll is held. A member who has not taken the oath is not entitled to claim any salary prior to the date that he takes the oath." It goes on, "A person who is a member at the time of a dissolution of Parliament continues to receive his salary until the end of the day of the poll in the consequent general election." The foregoing properly reflects the practice of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. Clearly, as per Mays, what I just read, that even though one is entitled to be paid from the day following the poll, this is contingent upon the oath being taken. In the Sharma case earlier cited, the members of Parliament were ready and willing to take the oath, whereas in the instant matter, the member from Micoud South, on his own volition, absented himself from the meetings where the oath would have been administered. Some may suggest that following the general elections and at the date of the member's departure, a speaker had not yet been elected. That would be in error, for the House of Assembly is never without a speaker simply by virtue of a general election result. Only that he ceased to be a member of the House on a dissolution of Parliament until the House first meets after the dissolution. Unquote. In simpler language, the Constitution is clear, pellucid, and unambiguous in its order that a speaker remains in office until the first sitting of the House following a general election where a new speaker is elected. There is, of course, a caveat to the speaker demitting office where the speaker following the election is elected to the position of minister or parliamentary secretary, but this does not apply here. It was only when this current House met at 10 o'clock in the forenoon on Tuesday the 14th of August 2021 that my immediate predecessor properly and legally demitted office. Clearly then, there was always a speaker in currency and permission could have been sought from him. None was. Consequently, on a proper construction of the standing orders, and as so eloquently and clearly stated in Mays, a member would not be entitled to be paid as an MP, and as per the Sharma case earlier cited, not simply because of the absence of the oath, but more importantly, because of the circumstances attendant to the oath not being taken until an oath is in fact taken. In the Trinidad case, all of the 18 members wished to be sworn in and were indeed present, willing, and available to be sworn. The frustration which resulted in them not being sworn was the House's inability to elect a speaker, which exercise must be completed prior to a swearing in. In the instant case, the member's absence was consequent upon a conscious decision by him to be elsewhere. These then are two different circumstances altogether. There is to the matter of the excuses proffered for the absences from the sitting. The member from Mico South is well aware of the provisions of Section 54 of the St. Lucia Constitution regarding the timing of the first sitting of Parliament following the general elections. Indeed, in a previous life, it was he who had to initiate that first meeting. Even armed with that knowledge that the opening of Parliament was constitutionally mandated to be held within a prescribed period, 1 month, he chose to absent himself from the sitting. Standing Order 80 of the House Orders, though already stated, bears repeating here. Where a member fails to obtain due leave of absence and be within 15 days after the session on which the member was absent, as aforesaid, satisfies the Speaker in writing that such failure was unavoidable, paragraph 2 of this order shall not apply to that member. Subsection 1 of that same standing order speaks to acquainting the Speaker of each absence from a meeting. Further, Standing Order 87.1 states, quote, "In any matter not herein provided for, resort shall be had to the usage and practice of the House of Commons of the Parliament of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which shall be followed as far as the same be applicable to this House, and not inconsistent with these standing orders, nor the practice of this House," unquote. Earlier, I acknowledged that in advance of each meeting, which he did not attend, the MP from Mico South did send an electronic note to that effect to the clerk. For the purposes of the operations of the office of the Parliament, a note to the clerk has to be construed as being a note to the Speaker. So let the record therefore reflect that I did receive these notes indicating an inability of the member from Mico South to be present. Unfortunately, the notes gave no reason other than being out of state for his absence. The only communication upon which a Speaker can take comfort and cognizance is what is officially sent to the Parliament, whether to the clerk or to the Speaker. Whatever is said elsewhere is of no moment to the office of the Parliament and can form no part in the Speaker's determination. The notes of the member from Mico South merely informing the office of the Speaker that, quote, "I'll be out of state and will not be able to attend the above sitting of the House," unquote, cannot meet the standard, quote, "to obtain due leave of absence" stated in Standing Order 80. Consequently, having read the notes sent to the clerk, which I repeat are the only documents upon which I can properly base a decision, I am not satisfied that the member from Mico South's absence was unavoidable. Accordingly, I will make an order that the member from Mico South be denied remuneration for the period of his absence. The member and I have had a discussion earlier today, as a consequence of which I will stay this order for a further 2 weeks to allow him a second opportunity so to do. Otherwise, this order shall take effect on November 30th, 2021. I was minded to have also included in that order a denial of his constituency allowance, but I am aware that such an order would negatively impact employees located within the constituency office and would also bring unnecessary dispute between the office of the Parliament and the utility companies which services the office. Whilst the lease for such an office is of course between the landlord and the parliamentary representative, it is the office of the Parliament which meets the cost of the utility services. Consequently, my order will not extend further than the personal emoluments of the member. In conclusion, it is perhaps a fitting time to set guidelines for the future. No ruling can apply simply to one member, be it the member from Mico South or any other. The Parliament of St. Lucia is a co-equal arm of government, and it cannot and must not be treated as an appendage or a thing of convenience. There are rules, and these rules do not make exceptions for one member or another. Members who are going to be absent would necessarily have to inform the office of the Parliament in advance. On the occasions when this is not possible, they ought to do so with alacrity immediately thereafter. Further, the reason for the absence has to meet the standards set out in Standing Order 80 and not otherwise. Parliament is a place where the most serious business of the country takes place. It is where laws are passed which affect every single member of our society. It is the only body under the Constitution authorized to permit the borrowing of money, which borrowing impacts not just the today, but indeed the tomorrow. I will not therefore allow this chamber to descend into irrelevance. With all of that having been said, I want to assure members that this presiding officer is not unmindful of the fact that things come up suddenly and without warning, which things may necessitate their immediate absence. All I ask, not out of respect for me, but instead out of respect for this great institution, that we at all times treat it with the respect it deserves and the dignity it can ill afford to be estranged from. I dare say, Parliament deserves nothing less, for it is not accidental that the legislature, not the executive, not the judiciary, but the legislature is the first arm of government referenced in the Constitution of St. Lucia, our supreme law. That is not an accident. I thank you. Statements of ministers. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I think I want to. You get the podium. Mr. Speaker, I will resist the strong temptation to speculate who started it, when or why. But this first 100 days in office thing, I won't call it a promise, has become a regular part of election time campaigning. However, time and experience have taught us the folly in biting off more than we can chew. From the mistakes of the past, we have learned to be careful not to knowingly make impossible promises. And if perchance we should in good faith make an election time promise, only to discover upon taking office, and through no fault of our own, it cannot be delivered, we will be upfront and honest enough to tell the people the reasons why. We trust and respect solutions enough always to tell them the truth, even when the truth is not good news. Which reminds me, while John F. Kennedy was working on his inaugural address with his speechwriters, the president at one point said, "I am sick of reading how we're planning another 100 days of miracles. Let's put in the speech that these things we're talking about won't all be finished in 100 days or in 1,000 years." Actually, the speech Kennedy delivered read,
All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, not even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us make a start. So, Mr. Speaker, we have made a start, and if I say so myself, what a fine start. It especially considering the unprecedented times we are living in and the unavoidable problems that this government and our people have inherited. The way we have started is a fine indication of where we are determined to be before this administration has reached the halfway mark of its first term. It also underscores our sworn commitment, regardless of circumstances, always to put the people of St. Lucia first. My government's first 100 days has been approached with a delicate mix of patience, stability, and honoring our commitments to the people of St. Lucia. We have been faithful to observing the rules by which our country is supposed to be governed, the Constitution. We have had the courage to be true to the Constitution and appointed a deputy speaker from our side. I understand the impatience of some who desired immediate action and changes to correct some of the wrongs that have been committed against the citizens of our country. Necessary as some of these institutional changes are, there is need to follow process, lest we appear autocratic and emotionally driven in the exercise of our decision making. I am in possession of a draft bill that will lead to the appointment of a special prosecutor, which, when agreed to by Cabinet, will be tabled in Parliament for consideration by this Honourable House. The reckless financial management of our country during the last administration is worse than we had initially thought. Under the last administration, St. Lucia had been left on the edge of a financial cliff, which requires prudent financial management if we have to avoid falling into a financial abyss. The former government, even before the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, had already placed the country in a financial mess. The situation was worsened by the COVID pandemic. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, the St. Lucian economy was highly indebted and unsustainable and badly managed before COVID. The economy of St. Lucia experienced a negative 23% decline, the highest in the region. St. Lucia borrowed the most in the Eastern Caribbean Monetary Authority and presently has the highest debt portfolio in the OECS Monetary Authority. Debt servicing, Mr. Speaker, accounts for 31% of total revenue. Mr. Speaker, allow me to briefly outline the state of the finances of our country when we elected to government in July 2021. The St. Lucia debt portfolio was as follows. Sovereign public debt, 3.923 billion. Local payables, 154 million. Design finance contracts for roads, 184.5 million to be repaid after 5 years. Other commitments not accounted for, like land acquisition due to landowners, 60 million. Amount due to the University of the West Indies, 27 million. Other balances due by ministries, example, the Ministry of Economic Development is indebted to work under the Constituency Development Program of 4.18 million, even if the grant allocation by the Taiwanese was provided to cover CDP payments. Mr. Speaker, the United Workers' Party government received 5 loans totaling 323.8 million from 4 existing international creditors. As at July 31st, 2021, the former government had used 301 million meaning that of the COVID borrowings, my government only benefited from $19 million of these loans. My government is only able to draw down on a $10 million US loan from the Republic of Taiwan. We have found a situation where government expenses have to be financed from revenue, internal revenue, rollover financing and bond financing and treasury bills. For the last 3 months and before the next budget cycle begins, we have no access to institutional lending as was available to the last government. The management of the effects of COVID-19, in particular the presence of the Delta variant, has compounded the challenges faced by my government. Fortunately, we have managed to stabilize in-country spread of the virus, and initial indicators are that we are doing a lot better. However, we must not drop our guard. We must remain vigilant by following the prescribed COVID-19 protocols to avoid any resurgence of the virus. I want to thank the first responders, the doctors and nurses for the efforts in the COVID battle. We also urge citizens to get vaccinated in order to hasten the return to normal life in our beloved country, St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to St. Jude Hospital. Mr. Speaker, it has been the solemn promise of my government to complete the St. Jude Hospital, which we continued to work on in 2011 when we elected back into office, until construction was stopped by the former government in an act of political retribution and selfish vindictiveness. Mr. Speaker, allow me to further update honorable members on the status of the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. Parliament will recall that I spoke to this issue on Tuesday, September 14, 2021. The review committee that I spoke of has completed its assignment and handed over the final reports. However, there are some critical findings of note which need to be reported to this honorable House. The review committee estimates that the new hospital remains less than 30% complete, and it would be impractical to work on the hospital in the bottom floor while in the top floor while patients were housed on the bottom floor. Impractical. The St. Jude Hospital report status, dated July 29, 2021, and prepared by the National Authorization Officer, NAO, of the Ministry of Economic Development, has the expenditure on Phase 2 from commencement in February 2019 to July 2021 at EC 118.05 million. The status report states that an amount of 89.3 million has been paid to date and the remainder is still owed. In relation to the new hospital, the review committee found that there is no program for the completion of any part of Phase 2 of the new hospital to facilitate the transfer of the operations from the George Odlum Stadium to the St. Jude Hospital into part or all of Level 2 of the new hospital. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, that the United Workers' Party government failed in its duty to provide health care to the people of the South by not completing the St. Jude Hospital. The decision was deliberate, callous, and aimed at financially benefiting members of the administration and their friends. As we continue to aim at providing adequate health care to the people of St. Lucia, we will complete the construction of St. Jude Hospital Phase 1. In this regard, we will seek engagement of power to identify a senior level czar to coordinate and provide general oversight to the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. However, Mr. Speaker, we will seek to find out at the appropriate time if taxpayers' funds were used in a prudent and honest manner in the construction of the so-called new St. Jude Hospital. Hiwanoa International Airport. The redevelopment of the Hiwanoa International Airport has been a policy priority of the government of St. Lucia for more than a decade. Commencement and implementation of the HIA project has been impacted by political, economic, and financial factors, and more recently, a health pandemic. In August 2021, the Cabinet of Ministers of St. Lucia appointed a committee to review the HIA redevelopment project and to offer recommendations related to the project scope and financing arrangements with a view to identifying fiscal space for reallocation to other priority projects of the government. So the term of the appointment, though the term of the appointment is for 90 days from August 30, 2021, the committee submitted an interim report containing initial findings, critical issues which have been observed during the review, and urgent recommendations. The committee found that the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, SLASPA, entered into a construction contract with Taiwan-based firm Overseas Engineering and Construction Company Limited, OECC, for the execution of the redevelopment of the terminal building of HIA. The selection of OECC was solely determined by the political directorate, devoid of competitive bidding. By letter dated February 20th, 2019, the general manager of SLASPA was given these instructions by the then Prime Minister. SLASPA also engaged the Florida-based architectural firm CBRE HWRY, previously known as Harry S&G, comprised of Harry International Company, a Georgian corporation, and S&G Incorporated, a Florida corporation wholly owned by Harry International Company. Harry and SLG formed part of the consortium with asphalt and mining, which SLASPA had attempted to pursue the airport redevelopment utilizing a design finance model in 2010. The A&M consortium was paid US $2 million, or approximately $5.78 million, for the intellectual property rights to the airport designs. These same designs were used and modified by the current architects, who were engaged at a contract price of approximately $15.9 million or $42.9 million EC. It is important to note that the addendum to this contract with an amended scope of services and costs was signed by the chairman of SLASPA on June 23, 2021. Executive Consulting and Management Services, ECMS, was retained by contract agreement dated July 19, 2018 to November 30, 2020 to provide the project coordinating services at a contract price of EC 2.08 million. ECMS was further retained by contract agreement dated December 1st, 2020 to May 30th, 2023 at an additional contract price of 1.98 million. The firm of Amicus Legal, which was retained as SLASPA's external counsel, was paid an additional 1.689 million for vetting of the loan agreements relating to the project. The original site for the new terminal was north of the existing terminal. However, the existing project site is further northwest and appears to be premised on integration of the Desert Star Holding DSH racetrack and a new seaport development. The new terminal will therefore be accessible from the Larissus Road, thereby requiring road construction which was outside the scope of the OECC. The project is expected to be executed in 5 packages. Foundation package, the Shell plus the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection, MEPF package, the interior package, the landslide package, and the airside package. The effective project start date was September 11, 2020, with a planned duration of 30 months. Construction commenced on November 23, 2020. Considering an initial budgeted project cost of US 175 million or EC 472.5 million, the then administration secured loan financing from the Exim Bank of Taiwan of US 100 million in 2018 and from a consortium of commercial banks of US 75 million in 2020. Additionally, the World Bank loan financing of US 45 million or EC 121.5 million was contracted in May 2020 for airfield projects. Separate and apart from the HIA terminal building and the World Bank component, there are enabling works and other master plan projects related to HIA. The full costing and financing information for those are not yet available to the committee. Consequently, the total cost to the government of the entire HIA capital improvement program remains unclear. Based on the information and documentation presented, the committee found some critical contractual and administrative issues, such as the absence of a peer review and structured project dossier for the project. The project was not comprehensively appraised at its commencement. The contract price for the project is not fixed and was based on preliminary rather than detailed designs. Sole source procurement was adopted rather than competitive procurement of architectural and engineering as well as contractor services. The prevailing administrative and contractual issues exposed SLASPA and the GOSL to significant risk, particularly project cost escalation. The expenditure to date is approximately 31.8 million or EC 85.86 million. In fact, the contractors claimed that the likely cost overruns up to the shell phase of the project will be approximately 113.4 million. Under the rough order of magnitude scenarios, ROM, a continuation of the project under its current track can cause the project cost to range between US 220 million or 5% of GDP to US 245 million or 5.6% of GDP. A worsening of project execution from its current track can cause the project to end up costing approximately 400 million US dollars. 400 million US dollars. Or 9.1% of GDP, a little more than double the initial ROM costing of US 1.75 million or 4% of GDP. The realization of any one of these scenarios can potentially push up the country's debt to GDP ratio. The project is behind schedule. The rate of project analysis indicates that the project is delayed by 9 months as of September 2021. Project delays are due to factors relating to the impact of COVID-19 and an ongoing impasse between CBR, HEERY and OECC on the Phase 2 Shell package. Should the existing impasse with the Shell package remain protracted, the project risks encountering disruption costs, including those relating to arbitration and litigation as specified in the contract. Further, poorly written contracts, namely those for CBRE, HEERY, and ECMS and OECCC, blur critical roles and responsibilities, especially those for project management. It can be concluded that the interests of the taxpayers of St. Lucia have not been adequately protected. The government who has guaranteed the project, and SLASPA has also provided the contractor with a guarantee to cover cost overruns with no limits for the construction of the project. This is dangerous, and if allowed to continue, can potentially result in a financial predicament for SLASPA, as the project cost can increase by more than 100%. The 5 options proposed for review are: 1. Do nothing, complete the terminal using the current design and determine the overall cost. 2. Scale down the existing design to obtain a single structure by removing components including the elevated roadway and food floor with VIP lounges. 3. Use a design from 2020 with construction of the terminal in the car park north of the existing terminal and demolition of the existing terminal. 4. Keep the existing terminal and incorporate it into the expansion. Create a connector and use the existing terminal for arrivals and the new scale down along the vertical plane terminal for departures, leaving room for further expansion if required. Piling for that phase would have already been in place. 5. Determine what could be salvaged from the ongoing foundation works and relocate the new terminal further towards the east. The government awaits the final report of the committee, but in the meantime will include and pursue the identification of various value engineering options to ensure that the money of the taxpayers of St. Lucia was not squandered. Constitutional reform. Mr. Speaker, government is committed to constitutional reform. We have signaled our good governance intentions by the appointment of a Deputy Speaker. We have in the first 100 days reignited the Constitutional Reform Commission, presented to Parliament in a motion debated in August 2015. On assuming office, the government recognizing that since the approval of the resolution by Parliament in 2015 for the establishment of the committee, little progress had been made in this important matter. We have taken steps to pursue the constitutional reform recommendations as a matter of high national priority. In fulfillment of this objective, government will work with and take the necessary steps in consultation with you, Mr. Speaker, and the Leader of the Opposition to ensure that this matter is adequately pursued. Government will take the necessary steps to make available to the Parliamentary Committee the requisite consultancy and technical assistance required in pursuit of its mandate and terms of reference. It is our aim that changes in the Constitution of St. Lucia will be effected fully or in part during this electoral term. Mr. Speaker, during this 100 days, we have passed the following. The Consumer Protection Act. This piece of legislation will streamline the administrative aspects and the Consumer Protection Act amendment. This piece of legislation will streamline the administrative aspects and processes relating to consumer protection complaints and the resulting investigations and hearings. The COVID-19 Prevention and Control Amendment Number 2 Act. The Amendment Number 2 Act amended the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Act Number 9 of 2020. The aim of the act is to regulate the containment of the spread of COVID-19 in the interest of public safety, public order, and public health. It had been in force since 2nd October 2020. Among other things, the new act made COVID-19 breaches ticketable offenses, thus reducing exposure of the members of the St. Lucia Police Force to COVID-19. Criminal Records Rehabilitation Offenders Amendment Act. 2 new sections were added, one of which were the records of persons who have been convicted of offenses under the COVID-19 Prevention Control Act number 9 of 2020 and simple possession of cannabis or cannabis resin that is 30 grams or less under the Drugs Prevention and Misuse Act Cap 3.02 may be expunged through exemption by the minister. The Drugs Prevention of Misuse Amendment Act number 14 of 2021. The act decriminalizes small quantities of cannabis by allowing the possession of up to 30 grams of cannabis for personal use. The Minister of Health will sign the Drug Prevention of Misuse Cannabis Cultivation Regulations, which will make provision for the cultivation of not more than 4 cannabis plants at a time by a person at his dwelling house. I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, that in spite of all the financial constraints, we have managed to meet some significant commitments made to the people by the St. Lucia Labour Party election manifesto. Meeting these commitments means changing the priorities of government by putting the people first. This simple but profound philosophical shift has brought much relief to parents and households across the country and will continue to bring much more in the coming days, weeks and months of this Labour administration. My ministerial colleagues will detail some of the initiatives which we have undertaken in bringing much needed relief to the people of St. Lucia. As we move past this milestone of 100 days, my government will satisfy its election promises to put the people of St. Lucia first. There are many investors keen to do business in St. Lucia because of the openness and trust that they have found in this St. Lucia Labour Party administration. I call on the St. Lucian public to be patient. We are in government to work in the interest of the people of St. Lucia. The times are challenging, but there is reason for optimism. Our tourism sector is on the up. Businesses are beginning to return to some normality. Investors are showing greater interest in St. Lucia. There are some major capital infrastructure works being planned. The COVID situation, according to the health authorities, is trending well. I look forward to continuously update you on the progress we have been making as a government which cares and puts the people of St. Lucia first. Meanwhile, we will continue to work in the interest of the people of St. Lucia. I want to thank members of the private and public sector, the unions, the protective services, the civil servants, the NGOs, the churches, for their understanding and willingness to dialogue with government. We are truly grateful. We pledge to govern with fairness, equity, dialogue, accountability. The future is challenging, but the prospects are encouraging as we seek to rebuild our country from the pandemic and the disastrous policies of the former government. I thank you.
Minister for Youth and Sport.
It's an 100 today. It's an 100.
Minister, before you commence, I just want to remind ministers who are making statements to make those statements available to the office.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make an official statement to this Honorable House on my activities within my ministry and indeed my constituency of Grosley during my first 100 days of being sworn into this august chamber. But before I do this, allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate St. Lucia's men 3x3 basketball team. As you know, who made all of us proud as they defeated Argentina to book their spot in the quarterfinal of the FIBA American Basketball Tournament. The likes of Troy Louison, Marcian Colgan, Keegan Breville, and Shamaja Baptiste must be commended for their hard work and exploits during this challenging time. Congratulations also goes out to our young athletes selected to wear St. Lucia's colors at the Junior Pan American Games scheduled for Colombia next week. Congratulations to Ryan Theodore, Alistair Theodore, Carrick George, and Christensen Leon participating in male basketball. Maya George, Petal Brand, Kalia Stevens, and Romani Lewis Emmanuel participating in female basketball. Jayon Odlem Smith, Deandre Blanchard, Naima Hazel, and Michaeli Shalman in swimming. Luke Chevrier for sailing, and of course, Jabuzili Michael Joseph in track and field. Mr. Speaker, on October 31st, 2021, I received an official letter from Babuno native Laverne Spencer informing me and the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports that after 23 consecutive years of national representation, she had decided to officially retire. Mr. Speaker, Laverne Spencer has been an example to all St. Lucians, and her achievements must never be forgotten by this and following generations. As such, the Ministry of Sports, along with the Cabinet of Ministers, will continue discussions on how best to honor this legend during our next independence celebration. Now, Mr. Speaker, when the election results were read on July 26, 2021, I knew in my heart and mind that the youth of St. Lucia was displeased with the previous government. But my eyes were truly opened to why, as I assumed the role of Minister for Youth Development and Sports. Mr. Speaker, during the first 100 days in my ministry, I found a number of facilities such as the Grosley playing field with bills in excess of $180,000 owed to Lucelect and therefore disconnected by this company. As a result, no development program could be instituted for our young people after hours. Mr. Speaker, I visited playing facilities under the National Sports Infrastructure Program, NSIP. $32 million to Lockerbie, 4 former national athletes in the cabinet, and the largest amount of money spent by a government in our nation's history still did not yield the sports progress that was promised. Mr. Speaker, very early on, I was furnished with information and updates regarding the National Sports Academy, where again millions of taxpayer dollars was spent in the name of sports development. Yet not one student has graduated with a certificate in a sports field that they can use anywhere in the region and in the world. In addition to this, I found a program set aside for our athletes who are the cream of the crop, broken with inefficacies that led to confusion on the actual implementation of this elite and burgeoning athlete program. As a result, Mr. Speaker, in my first 100 days, I recommended to the Cabinet of Ministers that we amend the elite athlete program to ensure that a properly constituted team of competent individuals assessed and made recommendations for which athletes are given the extra attention that is needed for their development. We included as part of a selection committee, amongst others, a representative from a national association so as to remove the influence of a politician on the selection of who is an elite or burgeoning athlete. In an effort to deal with the issues of playing fields being inadequately maintained and managed, and electrical bills being so exorbitant that they are cut off by Lucia, this government has put together a group of sports-minded persons born and bred in St. Lucia to put together once and for all a facilities management policy. Mr. Speaker, instead of the ad hoc manner in which a playing field is managed and maintained in one way, and another playing facility a mile away is managed in another way, this policy will be a legal guide for how all playing fields across the island is managed. Mr. Speaker, after deep thought, evaluation and research, within my first 100 days, I have written and recommended for approval from the Cabinet of Ministers to replace the St. Lucia Sports Academy with a sports development and administrative village. You see, Mr. Speaker, we are in the scientific age. And while a number of other small islands have embraced the scientific approach to sports, St. Lucia continues to lag behind, and it has allowed a number of our talented athletes to either fall prey to injury or lack the scientific information, the physiological information to ensure progress. As such, Mr. Speaker, the vision is to ensure that this facility continues to have a teaching component. But with this teaching components, athletes are connected with certified online programs, including the sports nutrition fields, the physical fitness fields, and the opportunities will also be provided to collaborate with regional and international bodies such as the Cricket West Indies to become certified coaches. The facility, Mr. Speaker, is expected to include a sports science lab. This will ensure that athletes' weight, their height, their hemoglobin levels, the biomechanical movements and injuries are evaluated. The mental aspect of sports will also be given attention. With the establishment of a sports psychologist, it will ensure that athletes are evaluated before and after competition. Mr. Speaker, this village will also be a high-performance center to provide suitable training programs and facilities to our elite athletes. Sports administration is another important aspect of our development. As such, for the first time in our nation's history, sporting federations and associations can also be given their secretariats from which their day-to-day operations can be managed. Mr. Speaker, there are other aspects of this village that our athletes can look forward to, including the engagement with sports nutritionists, and of course include camping rooms for national teams and organizations ahead of competitions and so much more. Now, Mr. Speaker, within my first 100 days as a minister, I saw all sorts of pretty playing fields that were badly constructed and dangerous to our people's health. As my mom would say, Belflare Salode. Yet the promise of a national aquatic center remained unfulfilled. Despite the fact that St. Lucia is down to host 2 major regional and international swimming championships, nothing was left in the kitty to build this stadium. After abusing the National Lottery's finances, there was no money left to get a stadium off the ground. But after much negotiation of efforts with the newly instituted Lotteries Board, clearing of space next to the Beauséjour indoor facility has commenced, signaling the commencement of the St. Lucia National Aquatic Center within this government's first 100 days. Mr. Speaker, lighting of facilities is an important aspect of our nation's sports and indeed social development. Getting young people off the streets after hours in meaningful programs goes a long way with dealing with some of the psychosocial issues within our communities, including crime. As such, in our first 100 days, our government has ensured that lights that have been secured are mounted on the Lakai court. After years of begging, the Bonte community, which produces some of the best basketballers on island, finally saw commencement of a lighting program on their court within our first 100 days. And of course, two of the players doing very well for St. Lucia play on this court. After years of begging and seeing organizations and persons from all over St. Lucia using their facilities for development programs, lights have been secured for the Corinth playing field. Mr. Speaker, after experiencing 5 years of neglect due to a Belrose doctrine, the community of Bocage has seen the erection of lights on their playing fields in less than 100 days. Mr. Speaker, in the first 100 days of being in government, I felt it was very important to have a meeting with the National Youth Council. As a result, on Friday, 10th September 2021, I, along with the Director of Youth, was given an official tour of the National Youth Council's Secretariat. Immediately after, I profited the opportunity to hear from the Council what some of their main challenges were. As a result, the Ministry has gone back to the drawing board to ensure that deeper ties are fostered with this organization going forward. Mr. Speaker, the first 100 days have been challenging for my ministry. With the safety requirements being what it is as a result of COVID-19, our youth workers have gone to work on sensitizing our nation's youth on the importance of following the protocols. And from all indications, they are happy with a government that has allowed for new legislation that has discontinued the abuse of young people in our communities for not wearing their mask. Yet the biggest issue facing our young people continues to be unemployment. As a result, we at the ministry have embarked on the establishment of a database of the unemployed in this country, while developing a modern method to link the employers with prospective employees. Therefore, the Youth Department has established an additional feature which is hoped to be an addendum to the Government of St. Lucia's webpage. Skilled 758 gives persons in the various communities with talent, skills, and capabilities the opportunity to upload their resume and curriculum vitae on the government portal. This will provide the Government of St. Lucia with a list of skilled and unemployed people which can be filtered to identify the areas of their capabilities on the island along with their geographical location of these unemployed persons. This will then allow all of St. Lucia in a particular location in need of a particular skill at a particular time to go onto the web page and gain access to someone who is unemployed to provide needed service to them at that time. Mr. Speaker, in the first 100 days, this web portal has been developed and we are currently presenting this website to various stakeholders, including the Chamber of Commerce, for further review. Mr. Speaker, when I went around the constituency of Grosley prior to the election of July 26, I saw and felt the level of neglect experienced by certain groups. I saw and experienced the neglect to certain constituents and communities. I saw and felt the level of neglect experienced by the committed men and women working at the Grosley police station. I visited the dilapidated police station before the election, but was not given a full tour of the facility at that time. Within the first 100 days, I made it my duty to book a full tour of the facility. And Mr. Speaker, what I saw there was truly heartbreaking. I listened with horror as I found out that the Grosley police station did not have a vehicle to respond to the various criminal activities in the island's most populous constituency, housing the most opulent individuals. Mr. Speaker, I made it my duty to make a presentation, make representation for these individuals at my next sitting of cabinet. my cabinet members were truly horrified. An Honorable Prime Minister and member for Castries East ensured that we were able to secure a brand new vehicle for the Grosley Police Station within our first 100 days. The community of Deramo also suffered a high level of neglect. Though begging for the road to be fixed, these individuals from a working class community were asked to come up with the money to fix their road, while roads were resurfaced in other areas that required little intervention. In my first 100 days, I ensured that the residents of Deramo not only saw their representative frequently, but their road was given the necessary attention required. The Deramo Court and Plain area were also neglected. So in our first 100 days, I ensured that new lights were installed on the court and the adjoining plain surface was rehabilitated. Mr. Speaker, the community of Piat was also neglected for a while. While roads were being built all around them, evidence of neglect went unchecked for months. In light of this, intervention was implemented to ensure that the road remained motorable in the first 100 days. There were also a number of dark spots that were provided with lights as residents expressed their fears of living in those areas. Mr. Speaker, during our first 100 days, we ensured that roads were built in areas that absolutely needed it. The community of Corinth was pleading for some intervention, and so a new road was constructed in this community. With no names given to those roads as yet, I am relegated to describing this road as the one leading to Richard Frederick's house. I was told by community residents that they were not getting the road because the member for Castries Central was at that time seeking election. The same can be said for Marisville. The road next to the old Sunset Motors building has been needed. The road has been needed for a while. And so we have commenced this project within our first 100 days. Mr. Speaker, by now everyone in the constituency of Grosley knows that as a young national athlete from the Grosley constituency, I did not have all the means to get basic gear and sometimes basic necessities such as roll-on, new underwear, toothpaste, etc. for travel. I remember well that it was the likes of Clarence Rambali who purchased my football boots for me ahead of representing St. Lucia. Joe Hall, Ricky McDoom, John Eugene, Alton and Kent Crafton, Frankie Gustav and the rest of the Grosley senior cricket team patched up in support of me before national duty. As such, since being a parliamentary representative for Grosley, I have ensured that every young person who has been selected for the St. Lucia national team gets support for their MP. And Mr. Speaker, I will continue to do this after I'm elected again and again and again and again by my people. Right, Sean? Mr. Speaker, education is perhaps one of the most important aspects of the development of my community. With this in mind, we distributed e-learning devices to over 200 students in the Grosley constituency in the first 100 days. In addition to this, after begging corporate Grosley, we distributed back-to-school supplies including bags, books, uniforms, and more to over 500 children. Mr. Speaker, the health of our community is also of great importance to me as MP. As a result, within my first 100 days, I visited the Moshi and Granivier health centers to complete a needs assessment for these facilities. The following week, accompanied by the Minister of Health, we visited the Grosley Polyclinic and provided the impetus for the refurbishment of the X-ray machine. Thank you, Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, we continue to lobby on behalf of the staff of all three health-related facilities in Grosley, as upgrades in their facilities will ensure they continue to provide wonderful service to the residents. So, Mr. Speaker, this 100-day period had to be the most difficult commencement period for any government in St. Lucia's history. We saw the highest amount of spending in our nation's history by the previous government ahead of the last general election. As a result, we inherited the worst fiscal situation this nation has ever seen. We have had to deal with the most deadly wave of the coronavirus immediately after being elected. No government in our nation's history has ever inherited such a phenomenon. But Mr. Speaker, this new Labour Party government may have to spend 15 years in government before we are able to receive the amounts of financing the previous government squandered in just their 5 years. But with the little that we've had, with the little we've received so far, we have shown a clear intention to be fiscally prudent. Mr. Speaker, with the little we've received so far, we have ensured that the health and education of our nation is given the support and attention it requires. Mr. Speaker, as you will hear from other members of this government, we'll continue to work hard as we continue to put the people first. I thank you.
Well done, comrade.
Minister for Equity.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, parliamentarians, good morning. The last year of life with COVID-19 pandemic has been very challenging on many levels. During this period, on a global scale, we've watched health systems of the nation struggle. We have watched large economies shut down. We have watched soaring unemployment. Mr. Speaker, in the Oasis and St. Lucia, of course, the situation has been no different. A bleak economic performance which has exacerbated social problems, placed considerable strain on the health system, and dealt a hard-hitting blow to vulnerable populations. Mr. Speaker, permit me to take leave at this time as I speak to the deaths we have encountered in St. Lucia as a result of COVID. Mr. Speaker, we've had persons coming to St. Lucia from Dominica, and for some health reason, and they have lost their loved ones. They have persons who have lost young ones, Mr. Speaker. And this morning, I grieve with this Dominican lady who came here just to bury her 20-year-old who got stabbed in Agard some 2 months ago. Madam, Mr. Speaker, as I reflect on what she came here to do, I couldn't help but, as the Ministry of Equity, support her
in facilitating the burial because she's not able to do this. She is a struggling person from Dominica. As well as Mr. Speaker, my cousin came only on Sunday, hoping to see her stepfather, but in the process of arranging to see her stepfather, within 1 week she lost her mother and biological father within 1 week, and she's here to bury her father and mother. Marie, I do sympathize with you. And of course, my Auntie Madeleine succumbed to some illness, and of course I know my family up in Therefore in the constituency are mourning the loss of almost 3 family members at once. So I beg and I take leave, as I did seek discussion with the Prime Minister, but through you, Mr. Speaker, I would wish if we would take a moment of silence for so many families in St. Lucia who have lost loved ones during this COVID period. Minister, if you would allow, just for a moment of silence, and I would ask members to stand with me just for a moment. Thank you. Thank you so graciously, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. In response to this crisis, our government have implemented several measures to contain the spread of the virus, to bring relief to vulnerable families, and to foster recovery of our economy. And so in St. Lucia, as we continue to implement measures to combat the current pandemic and deal with the consequences of economic contraction, we also continue to focus on the implementation of appropriate responses to the existing and emerging social issues. Such focus, Mr. Speaker, is in keeping with our vision of an inclusive society and our philosophy of putting people first. Today, Mr. Speaker, as Minister responsible for equity, social justice and empowerment, I will share with you in this honorable house, as well as the general public through you, the range of completed and ongoing interventions implemented through my ministry, as well as through constituency arrangements to provide immediate relief and assistance to our people and to build resilience of our population. The following, therefore, constitute some of the key achievements during this first 100 days in office. I will start with achievement at a ministerial level, and for ease of understanding, Mr. Speaker, these will be presented in 2 categories, namely the administrative matters and projects and programs. Administrative matters. Engagement with heads of department for policy dialogue. Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe that a common vision supported by collective action is powerful in advancing projects and programs towards successful outcomes. Consequently, upon assuming office, Mr. Speaker, as an early activity, I met with heads of department and key stakeholders to articulate the policy direction of the government of St. Lucia relevant to the mandate of the ministry. Mr. Speaker, I wish to note that upon taking this office, the Ministry of Equity, the only thing that was changed, Mr. Speaker, is a chair that I met there that was not suitable for the minister and a clock on the wall. But everything I met in the ministry and everyone is still there. Mr. Speaker, this dialogue was intended to foster a common understanding of the alignment of government policy with the strategic priorities of the ministry, and I am confident that this conversation, as well as others to come, will positively impact the ministry's programming to the benefit of the beneficiary groups and others. Mr. Speaker, I need to speak on the matter of the elder care. Mr. Speaker, as an administrative matter, we met 448 persons providing care to the elderly. There were 18 supervisors and 484 persons providing care. Mr. Speaker, I want to inform you that we had to embark on structural change to improve the welfare of those receiving the care. And whereas some persons are asking of changes, I need to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that out of 486 persons in total, because we added 83 persons were changed to facilitate the better care of individuals, and out of 18 supervisors, only 3 persons were changed. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report to this Honorable House that 17% of the total persons involved in providing elder care were changed to facilitate better care for those receiving it. I'll give an example, Mr. Speaker. If somebody is visually impaired, how can they care for somebody? If they cannot identify and read the medication prescription, how can they provide the help and the care to individuals? There are some persons with mobility problems. How can those persons move to a home to provide care? And that's the only reason why those changes were made. And please note, like I said, 17% only. So out of 486 persons providing care, 83 persons would change. And out of 18 supervisors, only 3 supervisors would change. Everybody else found working in the elder care are still at work. On the administrative matters, review of reinstatement of all boards under the purview of the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice and Empowerment. Mr. Speaker, there are 3 agencies under the direct purview of the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice and Empowerment with boards of directors, and these are the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, the James Bell Fund, and the National Conservation Authority, NCA. However, in setting into office, I realized that in some cases, chairpersons and board members had already tendered their resignation, rendering those boards to be non-functional. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, within the first few weeks in office, these oversight bodies were reorganized and reinstated to continue delivering on their respective mandates. In fact, the NCA and SSDF board have met and have commenced critical discussions relevant to these organizations. Conduct a comprehensive review of the operations of the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, and of course, one would have heard previously in this House when I reported that during the last 10 days before election, $650,000 were expended at the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, for which no report can be made or has been made available at this time. Mr. Speaker, the core mandate of the SSDF is to ensure the delivery of basic services to disadvantaged and marginalized communities in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I spent 15 years in another life with the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, and I know that too well. In keeping with this mandate, the SSDF has successfully administered several social assistance programs throughout the island. Notwithstanding, given the complexity of the external as well as internal environment, and in keeping with good practices, it is important that the agency assesses its operations periodically and to modify or implement measures as necessary for improvement of operations. As such, the comprehensive assessment seeks to review, evaluate the current operations of the SSDF towards identification of concrete recommendations for improved operations of the fund. Mr. Speaker, this activity, which commenced on September 6, 2021, will be completed in January 2022, and thereby a decision will be made on the implementation of the recommendation and actions. Rationalization of office space. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Equity has several offices in various locations around the island. Cognizant to existing fiscal challenges and taking other issues into consideration, the Ministry has commenced a process of rationalizing of office space towards efficient and optimal utilization of space. This process is also expected to redound to improve service delivery as clusters of similar social protection services may now be accessible in a single point. Mr. Speaker, just by way of example, we have identified a single movement of one agency, and that would lead to savings of $500,000 annually. Mr. Speaker, just by way of example, I repeat, we've identified one agency that needs to be relocated because of wasteful space, and we will save $43,000 monthly, or approximately $500,000 annually.
Where are they at Colony House?
I will not speak to the location at this time. Mr. Speaker, can I speak to the Boys Training Center? Mr. Speaker, justifiably or unjustifiably, the Boys Training Center has been the focus of intermittent media attention for some time. In light of this, and given the ministry's commitment to the existence of an environment conducive to rehabilitation, the ministry is in the process of revisiting the operations of the Boys Training Center towards restructuring and reprogramming for overall improvement. In the immediate, the legal and policy framework which supports the center operations will be reviewed and updated as necessary. Operational processes will be enhanced and staffing arrangement will be reviewed and deficiencies will be addressed. Mr. Speaker, this government, on the principle of putting people first, we are putting the young wards who are in the care of the state, we are putting them first. Mr. Speaker, much is being discussed in the media, but this government will not tolerate abuse of any kind towards the wards at the Boys Training Center. While we are sensitive and will ensure that the working environment for the staff is good, but we will focus on getting persons with the right character, the specific potential and competences so that they can serve the Boys Training Center well. We will put the young men first, and the ministry will also engage, or we have engaged last week, the Caribbean Development Bank with respect to the relocation of the Boys Training Center, as well as revamping the programs that we are offering. Initial talks, which took place in 2020, which were deferred as a result of COVID-19, will be back. And as the CDB has indicated, we will consider all other options, including repurposing of a school for the Boys Training Center, which is a lot cheaper than constructing a very large building as what obtains currently. And now, Mr. Speaker, let me turn my attention to some of the core programs at the ministry level. The implementation of an educational access program for students in need of educational assistance. Mr. Speaker, from my vantage point as the Minister of Equity, I can speak with much accuracy of the critical need for providing support to households to meet educational needs of the children. As anticipated, job losses as a result of COVID has negatively impacted the fiscal space of households and significantly reduced the ability to provide for some of the basic needs. This is most evident in the number of requests for various forms of assistance presented to the ministry and to the SSDF by households in need. The Education Access Program therefore presented a key social assistance intervention for vulnerable households within 17 constituencies. A total of $1.8 million was allocated to this program, and to date, approximately 2,500 households, or approximately 5,000 children, have benefited from this effort. Assistance ranged from the provision of uniform, including shoes, books, and even the procurement of learning devices. Implementation of the Education Access Program was effected during the period of July to August 2021 and was administered by the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, whilst I have heard the argument that this is not an entirely new program, I think the focus is on what has been achieved during the first 100 days in office. And in that regard, I want to make it clear that this government, the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party, mobilized the necessary resources and implemented this program in an effort to address the needs of the most vulnerable among us. Implementation of the Hurricane Elsa Recovery Program. Mr. Speaker, the Hurricane Elsa Recovery Program was designed to provide assistance to needy person families whose homes were impacted by Hurricane Elsa, July 2nd, 2021. 3 million Eastern Caribbean dollars was allocated for this program, which was implemented by the ministry with technical support from the St. Lucia Social Development Fund and the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. Though originally planned to be implemented in July 2021, the program was redesigned after this government took office to ensure greater efficiency, more effective targeting, and smooth implementation. Mr. Speaker, as part of the process and for accountability purposes, technical teams were deployed to assess or verify damaged households and to document the same via photographs. The technical teams were also responsible for determining the materials needed for eligible households. For improved resilience to the beneficiary household, the standard and guiding the implementation of the hurricane program, we focus on improving the building codes. We spoke to roof pitch being increased from 20 to 25 degrees, Mr. Speaker, rafters being placed at no more than 2 feet apart, and to include hurricane straps at the feet of those rafters. Mr. Speaker, it is expectation that the renovation of these homes under this program will be more resilient. And in future disasters, and the beneficiaries of these households will not have the need to revisit the ministry for such assistance. Mr. Speaker, this is an important program and was implemented during the period August to October 2021. A total of 322 households or 130 persons who benefited from this ELSA program. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of income support programs for bus operators and licensed bar owners.